part of this series that we're in right now is about basically saying that there are times in our life where things happen, transitions occur, challenges that we face are going to be there. And the question is often, we all have this question, is where's God in that? How's God moving in that? And what's my responsibility? What's God's responsibility and what's mine? And so we've kind of been going through this series. We're in the third week of this series. And so if you've missed any of the last 2 weeks, you can catch them online. You can get them on the app. There's a variety of ways to find the teaching just to get caught up. But I'll give you kind of a brief summary of what we've talked about over the last 2 weeks so we can all be on the same page, okay? But I wanted to kind of give you just the series premise. This is the premise for the entire series, and that is that if God was faithful in the past, shouldn't we assume that He's going to be faithful in the future? Because see, sometimes we forget that. And so I think that's the premise for this entire thing, that if God has been faithful before, then He will be faithful again. And so when we go through challenges, difficulties, transitions, whatever, we can trust that God will always be faithful. And that's important as we kind of walk through this series, because that principle, if we can get a hold of it, if we can grab hold of that and hold on tight, even through the storms of life, you will discover that you are able to weather the deserts, the in-betweens, the limbos. Now, you may be asking, what in the world is limbo? Well, it's not the game. We're not going to talk about the game. We're not going to get a pole out and start doing some dancing and some limbo. Limbo is really this, and I'll give you some definitions of what limbo is and why we titled the series Limbo. Limbo is where life is not what it once was. Okay? Limbo is where the future is in question, where everything normal is interrupted. Limbo is a place where everything that we hoped for, all the feelings that we longed for, go to this place of impatience and futility and despair. Sometimes we're kind of tempted to embrace all of those emotions. Limbo is fertile soil for emotional breakdown. It is a great place for that to happen. But you know, limbo is also a great place for us to get turned towards God. It's fertile soil for us to grow in our faith. And the question is will we choose to do that or not? And it is a choice. And that's something that we'll talk about. But here's the thing that I think kind of is a interesting phrase. And it's kind of the one that's been on my mind this whole time. And here it is. I love this. It's like you can have a vital faith. Like imagine this. You can have a vital faith that prompts you to be your best when things are at their worst. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, we all know what it's like to be at our worst. Some of us know us intimately enough that we've seen individuals at their worst. There are people that have seen you there. And the question that I have, if it's possible, if these things are true, if these things that I'm talking about over the last few weeks and today are true, then I believe it's possible for you to have a vital faith, a faith that when challenges come, when difficulties come, that you can be at your best and not at your worst. I don't know about you, but I think that sounds pretty cool. That sounds pretty awesome to be in a place where you can experience life at that level. And that's what I hope you get from this series, is that you'll be able to absorb this teaching at such a level that that would be true for you, that that would be true in your life. And so the last 2 weeks we've discussed this. Trust evicts complaint. So like we've been talking about Israel, they like to complain a little, and we'll get to that. But Israel complains a little, and one of the things we've learned is that trust in God, trust will evict complaint. They can't coexist. So if complaint is living in your house and trust shows up, complaint has to leave. And that's important for us to know. And then the second thing that we've kind of really dug down on last week was that when these things happen in our life, oftentimes what happens is that we will turn away from God and we will complain and we will murmur and we will say all these things. But in reality, we are just saying them to everybody around us, but we're not really turned towards God and saying, God, would you help me? And that's subtle, because the difference between praying and complaining sometimes is our position, is whether or not we're facing God or turned away from God. And that's sometimes how subtle it can be. And so we talked about how Moses kind of got in that place, and Moses was praying towards God, and Israel was rebuking or rejecting God with their behavior. Now, so we'll pick it back up today, the story, just to give you kind of a brief rundown of what's happening in Numbers 11. So we're in Numbers chapter 11, and we've been there this whole time, and we will be for the entire series. But basically, I wanted to read this opening statement, and this is just kind of, Numbers 11 starts with this phrase, and this is verse 1. It says this: soon the people began to complain about their hardships. That's a great place to open a chapter. And then it says, and the Lord heard everything they said. So that's how it starts. The whole chapter starts there. They began to look at their circumstances and their situations, and they began to complain, and God heard their complaints. And so Moses is leading this group of people. He's leading, some would estimate around 3 million people through the desert, right? I mean, so picture this. They've left Egypt. The place of their slavery, the place of bondage, the place where they were brutalized. They've left there. Moses came and got them out of there, and they're moving towards the promised land. They're moving towards this great thing that God has for them. A place that is described as a land of milk and honey. And you're like, well, I don't even like milk. Well, it's good regardless. It's good. But they're moving towards the promise. But there's this in between. There's this limbo. There's this time of transition. There's this difficulty that they're in. And Israel's response to it is, I don't like it. But that's what they're doing. And so if you read Numbers 11, if you underline this word like whining or complaining, you would be amazed at how many times that word is mentioned just in chapter 11. And so they're just frustrated. And this isn't the first time. I mean, right on the heels of God parting the Red Sea, they were complaining. They didn't have enough food. They didn't have enough water. They didn't have this. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know anybody like that? Maybe you're like that. Maybe you have kids like that. But you know what I'm saying is that, and so they're in the desert, they're in this wilderness, and they're complaining. They're murmuring. And last week we talked about how Moses had it up to here. He was tired of it. I mean, think about leading a group of people where that's all they did. That's no fun. Think about leading a business or a company or something where everybody around you just complains that they have to work. It's like, what am I going to do? And Moses, he asked these questions. He's like, why me? Why'd you put me here? I didn't birth these people. You're asking me to care for them like they're little babies, and I'll pull them together and I'll just suckle them like a nursing mother. That's what Moses says to God. He's like, why did you do this to me? I don't want to be in this situation. And I don't know if you've ever been there. I don't know if you've ever felt like that. But oftentimes we know what that feels like. My son, Caleb, who's 7, likes oatmeal. Right? I mean, you guys, anybody like oatmeal? Yeah, loves the oatmeal. Right. Oatmeal is oatmeal. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I know there's probably like special oats you can get at some fancy grocery store, but oatmeal's oatmeal. It's like oats, and it's a meal. And some people put milk and sugar and butter. I like that. And then there are others that just eat it plain, which that just seems boring to me. But oatmeal is like this breakfast. People like it. It fills you up. My son loves oatmeal as long as his mother makes it. Because apparently my wife, Gretchen, is a master of oatmeal. When I make oatmeal, this is how it goes. I'll make the oatmeal because like maybe Gretchen's busy, and I'll make breakfast for the kids before they go to school, and I'll make the oatmeal. I never make it right. It's always wrong. And he'll look at it and he'll be like, Dad, that's not right. You don't make it like Mom. And he goes off on this whole thing. And I'm like, Are you kidding me? I mean, I have a lot of patience for this kind of thing. I really do. I mean, my mercy gift comes out. It's brilliant. And the oatmeal. And he just complains about this oatmeal. And it's because I apparently use too much liquid. And so he likes it a little bit coarser, without it's not runny, you know what I mean? It's more flaky or something. I don't know. And but it drives me thicker. Oh, that's great. Thicker. But in the end, he just complains about this oatmeal. And it just drives me crazy. And I suspect if you have children, they've probably done that to you before. Where you're like, just eat it. Right? Just eat it. I mean, geez. There are kids starving it. You play that card on them. You better eat it. But, we know what it's like to have people around us complain. Complain about their job. It's not good enough. Not whatever. My boss, complain about the fact they don't make enough money. Complain about their spouse to other people. We complain. Complain about our church. Complain about the leaders of the church. Complain about that pastor. He just says mean things. Whatever. But we complain. We know what it's like. And then this is what I love about where we're at in the story. So you pick this up in Numbers 11:13. But let's check back in with Moses. So he's in wilderness camp with the Israelites. They're stuck in limbo. And basically what's happened is the Israelites have come to him and said, we're sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this oatmeal, right? I'm sick of this. I'm sick of being in the desert. I'm sick of this manna. Because manna is disgusting. I don't like it. And manna, I've told you before, is manna just simply means, what is this? That's actually what it is. What is this? No one knows. But no one wants to eat the manna. And so they come to Moses and they're mad and they're telling him all this stuff. And they're just saying, hey, there was lots of good vegetables and cucumbers and leeks and onions and good fish when we were in Egypt. Even though we were in slavery, even though we were back here in slavery, there was really great food. And they come to Moses, and I love this, in Numbers 11:13, it says, and they demand this, we want meat. They're tired of the manna. They're tired of the oatmeal. And they want meat. And that's where Moses is. And he's dealing with this group of people, and he's saying all these things to God, and he's expressing his feelings to God. He's frustrated. And then in Numbers 11:14, I love this. It says in 14, it says, I can't carry all these people by myself. The load is far too heavy. He's at his wit's end. He has come to the end of his rope, and he is praying to God for help. Lord, will you help me? That's where he's at. And there's a part of me that wonders what's going to happen next. He goes to God. He shares his thoughts. He's frustrated. I can't carry this burden. And so I don't know if you're wondering the same thing, but how will God respond to his servant? I mean, it's God's man. This is Moses. He was selected, handpicked for this job. How is God going to respond to his weary, tired, worn out servant? That's kind of where we pick up the story. What's God going to do? What's he going to do? Well, listen to this. I love this. So in Numbers 11, 16 and 17, this is what the Lord says. This is what he's about to say it. Here it is. This is in 16. Then the Lord said to Moses, gather before me 70 men who are recognized as elders and leaders of Israel. So that's his first step. Look, go get some people. Get the men, leaders of Israel. And then he says, bring them to the tabernacle to stand there with you. Verse 17, I will come down and talk to you there. I will take some of the Spirit that is upon you, Moses, and I will put the Spirit, that Spirit, upon them also. Now listen to this. They will bear the burden of the people along with you, so you will not have to carry it alone. Isn't that good? Now, God could have drop-kicked Moses, but he didn't. Because, see, the difference between Moses is he wasn't complaining so much as he was praying to God for help. I need you. I don't want to deal with these people anymore. I'm tired of it. And God says, okay, I get you. I see it. I see you. I hear you. Right? And his response is, go get some people. That's where he starts. And so one of the things I want to talk about, and really kind of becomes the backdrop for the entire message, is that God spreads out the burden. When we are in limbo, God spreads out the burden. That's his goal. The reason the community of faith is so important, the reason small groups are so important, and I'll get to that, is that God spreads out the burden. Because see, in life, sometimes we get to a place where we feel isolated. We feel alone. We feel like everybody's against us. Everybody's complaining. Everybody's doing this. And we just start to sink deeper and deeper into this place where we feel more and more isolated and more alone. And let me tell you, this is a truth. I say it all the time, is the enemy of your soul wants nothing more than to get you isolated so he can pick you off. And that's why solo Christianity doesn't work. It's an unbiblical proposition that far too many people have embraced. And so we come to this, and God says, get them out. So don't believe me. Believe God. God says, spread it out. Spread the burden. Make sure you've got some people in your life that you can do that with. Listen, so God acknowledges that the burden was too great for Moses. He sees it. It's like, yeah, you're out of your league. You're in trouble. I see it. But I'm going to help you. Isn't that good news? You may be out of your league today, but God's going to help you. He will. But you got to get turned towards him and not away from him. He's faithful, right? If he's been faithful in the past, he'll be faithful in the future. So it's so critical that we see this. So he not only sees Moses, but he also does something about him. He acknowledges the burden, and he says, you can't carry this alone. I got to get you some help. So he spreads the burden around. He lightens the load. One author calls it this. He says it's a multiplication of God-empowered leadership. Because if you notice, it wasn't like just go pick somebody and they picked these guys and then all of a sudden it was done. No. It says that the Spirit or the anointing that was on Moses was transferred to these people. So they really, in essence, were little Moseses. Moses-eyes. And they were there to do what God had called them to do. So he takes them, he anoints them, he gives them the Spirit of God. So there is a God-empowered leadership model here. It's not just that, you just pick somebody randomly or you took a vote. Churches love to vote. Think about that. Democracy. Think about democracy in the church. I can't even talk about this. But my point is that you don't see a vote here. You see a transfer. You see a transfer here. And that's critical that we see that. So God does something. He transfers it. And when he does, there is a God-empowered leadership that happens. Because the Spirit of God is on it. Not because somebody voted on it, but because God moved and the Spirit of God got released onto people for leadership. Then it says, so he gets the men, he recognizes them, the elders and leaders, and he brings them together. And then what does he do? He says, bring them to the tabernacle. I love the tabernacle. I love to think about this, and some of us are like, what is that? You know what's so cool about the tabernacle? As I think about a church and a theater, the tabernacle was a portable worship tent. That's it. We have our own portable worship tent right here. It was a portable worship tent then this is what made it unique, is that the very presence of God dwelled in that tent. And so that's where God tells Moses to bring these guys. So come to the tabernacle, and he says that I'll speak to you. Because see, sometimes in life, I find that things get hard. We get stuck in limbo, situations, circumstances, whatever. But I wanted to share this story. Several years ago, my wife and I were going through a very difficult time in ministry. We were having a really hard time. We were dealing with some dynamics that were very difficult, very painful. You know what I'm talking about? It's like this a time or a season where you're just experiencing an enormous amount of pain. You feel like so beat up. You just want to lay down, hide, pull the curtains down, don't leave the house. We all know what that feels like. And we were going through this really difficult time, and our daughter, Svea, was having a birthday. And neither one of us wanted to throw a birthday party. You ever been there? We didn't have the energy. We didn't want to do it. We didn't have any desire to throw the party. Now, it's not because we didn't love our daughter. It's not because we didn't want her to have a great party. We just weren't in a place emotionally to have a great party. And my wife was a part of this small group with these ladies in the church. And it's one of my favorite stories of small groups is that she was in this small group of ladies and they recognized the pain we were in. And so what they did, they took it upon themselves. All of them took a piece and they decided to throw a party for our daughter. Some of them took care of games. Some of them took care of presents. Somebody took care of all the crafts. Somebody took care of the food. And literally, it was a party in a box. We didn't have to do anything other than show up. That made a difference in our life. When you're going through hard times, when you're in limbo, and somebody comes in and you spread the burden out, and it's even more brilliant when you don't ask for it, God shows up, spreads the burden. But here's the question that I'm faced with often, and I think you should be as well. When that happens in your life, do you have that group around you? Do you have those kinds of people in your life, invested in your life, that are walking through life with you? That when things get nutty, because they will, that you have a group of people around you that can help you? That's my hope and prayer for you as a pastor. That you wouldn't just come on Sunday morning, though I want you to come, but that you would move from the stadium to the community, that you would move from a place of big to little, so that you can not only be known, but you can grow, and that people can watch your back. Because we all need somebody to watch our back. Because sometimes life gets hard, doesn't it? We go through challenges, difficulties, and that's kind of what we see as we look at what's happening to Moses. I don't even want to go into the pathology of Moses, but think about this. He's a single guy, one guy, right? I'm just saying single in the sense that he's one guy. One guy, okay? He's watching after 3 million people. We can't even talk about that. That's crazy, right? And God shows up and helps him. He can't handle it, which I'm pretty sure God knew already. You know what I mean? And so life may be a mess, but you are not designed to go it alone. That's why we do small groups. I do not do small groups. I do not facilitate them or have them in this church so that I could build great small groups. No. I have small groups because I know you and me need people watching our back. We need people coming around us. We need people challenging us. We need people holding us accountable. You want to get better? Have some people help you. We need to spread the burden out. That's what we see God telling him to do. God will provide exactly what we need at exactly the right time. Because see, sometimes we get in a place where we're like, I don't know where God is. Is he going to show up? Is he going to hear my prayer? Is he going to do something? And I'm telling you, if he's been faithful in the past, he will be faithful in the future. Sometimes he may not come when we want him, but he comes right on time. God will provide for you. I don't know how. I don't know how it's coming, but I do know this. He will provide what you need at exactly the right time. God is a God who provides. It may be a timely email. Literally, it may be that small. A timely email that somebody just encourages you or says something nice because you were about to take a jump. It's an email. That God will provide strength for you to deal patiently with your children when they don't like their oatmeal. He will give you strength for the journey. He'll provide a friend just to come and watch your kids so you can get some reprieve. At just the right moment, God shows up. He provides peace in difficult times. God loves you. And because he loves you, he provides for you just like a parent would provide for their child. That is the God we serve. God provides for us. He's concerned about you. And just like Peter says, when he says to all of us, give all of your worries and cares to God, for he cares for you. Some of us don't know that. Some of us don't know that God cares for us. We think God's just out to get us. And I want to speak to that just real quick. God is a God who provides. God is a God who cares. When you're in the midst of the limbo, when you're in the between, God is the one that shows up, and He will provide at exactly the right time. That's the good news. We don't ever have to go it alone. God spreads the burden. He's helping us out. And so Moses invites all these leaders into the tabernacle. And right there in the middle of the tabernacle, God begins to speak. And the presence of God comes in. And it says that he was rescued. The shoulder, his shoulder was not big enough to carry this burden. God shows up, rescues him. How many times when you read the Psalms, it says that God came to my rescue? And that's what He's doing right here for Moses, and He will do the same for you. What is your burden today? Where are you struggling today? Where can't you find your way? Where are you today in limbo? Could you believe, just maybe, that God will provide, that God will show up, and God will do something mighty in your life? Could you put your faith in that? And so God provides for Moses, and He'll provide for you as well. But it's so important that in this in-between, in this limbo, that we draw near to God. Because going away from God is not going to help us. And how often in our lives do we do that? We go it alone. We think we can figure it out. We don't think to pray first, we think to complain. We don't think to pray first, we think to get angry. We don't think to pray first, we think to worry and be anxious. We don't think to get turned towards God, to draw close to God, because He's going to show up. When I was in seminary, which was a while back, my wife and I were living in this little brick house. It was a cinder block house. And it was like, 100 square feet or something. It was ridiculous. But we didn't have a lot of money. I think one year I made $3,000. It's pretty amazing. I was providing like a champ, I wasn't making anything. And we didn't know how certain bills were going to get paid. And, that season of our life was one of the sweetest seasons of our life. Because you know this, when you get more, it's just more. More is just more. More creates more stress, more worry, more anxiety. But I tell you, some of the sweetest times my wife and I ever had was in that little box. When we were just depending on God. We didn't have enough money. And yet God always made up the difference. We'd have a little $100 check show up on the front door. Something. It's just crazy stuff that would happen all the time. And you could write books about it. But God showed up. I have this story I want to tell you. It's one of my favorite stories of recent days. And I was at my son, Caleb, 7, again, the oatmeal boy. He also likes to play sports, And this year he got to play basketball for the first time, and he was just having a great time playing basketball. And he had some running shoes, they weren't basketball shoes. They were like just regular running shoes. And so there's no ankle support, whatever. And they were fine shoes, but him and I went looking for some shoes, we went to the shoe store, and we were looking at all these shoes, and I found these shoes, and I just thought they were the greatest. They were red, which elevation, I love red, It's like, ooh, I like red. They were red Nike basketball shoes for like a little boy, And I'm like, those are the coolest shoes ever. And I wanted to get them. And they were on sale. But they were like $50. And I didn't have $50 to get those shoes. And I remember saying to my son, I hated it. We were like looking at him. He's like, yeah, those are great, man. I was like, yeah, they are great. And I said, son, I just don't have the money right now. But I promise you, I'm going to get you some shoes. Right? And he's like, okay, Dad, I got it. And it was this kind of sweet moment, whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to get these shoes? I did not ask God for those shoes. Didn't ask Him. I didn't walk out of there and pray this big long prayer and say, God, would you bring me the shoes? Nothing. $50 for these shoes. The next day, I think, I walk into church, somebody comes up to me and hands me $50. Now, let me tell you something about that story. There's one thing about that story that I could say, I prayed to God and He delivered. You know what I love most about that story? Is I didn't pray about it. He knew that I wanted to do that. That wasn't even like I needed food or water. He just knew that I wanted to do that for my son, and so He got somebody who was listening moved in the right direction, positioned in the right gap to show up and be faithful to what God told him to do. And the next thing you know, my son is wearing a new pair of Nike shoes. You don't see, God provides even when we don't ask. He's always looking for you. He's always seeing you. He's always after you. He wants to help you. And I love that story because it just blesses my heart because I didn't pray to God about it. He just knew. He was just like, man, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to blow your mind. Love that story. You see, that's what God does. He shows up and he provides and he does all these amazing things. And we so often struggle to even believe that he's going to do it. And that's why this whole series is about trust. Will you trust him? Will you believe that he'll provide for you? Guys, I could tell you so many stories. I don't have enough time. I could tell you stories about Moses. I could tell you stories about Jesus. I could tell you stories about even the ones that don't even show up. They're like a blip on the screen. Like, for example, Hagar, heard of her? Hagar was the slave, basically, of Sarah. So you got Abraham and Sarah. You maybe heard of Abraham and Sarah. Sarah didn't want to wait on a baby. So she gave Hagar to Abraham. They slept together, had a baby. His name's Ishmael. Right? You remember this story maybe? Well, of course, Sarah gets mad about this. She sends Hagar away because she's tired of dealing with it. How happy she is with her new little baby. So she sends her out, right? She goes out under this tree, and the coolest thing is that God shows up. God shows up. God shows up in this pagan slave woman's life. Doesn't have to. There's no promise. There's no covenant with her. He shows up and he speaks life into her and says, this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm going to do through your son. And she starts to, and this is what I love about this. This is the best part, is that when he does that, there's this phrase that it says that place, she names God. So Hagar names God because of what he did. Names him. And she says, you're the God that sees. Isn't that amazing? You're the God that sees. And then you go all the way back to Exodus 3, and it says that God heard the cries of his people in Egypt. Do you remember this? He heard the cries of his people, and he sent Moses. But you notice it says this. It says that I have seen your misery. I see it. I see your misery. I've seen it. It says I've heard your cries. So he's seeing it. He's hearing it, and he says, I am concerned about your situation. Guys, that is good news. That is good news. So wherever you are today, God sees you, he hears you, and he is concerned. And quite frankly, there is nobody else that I would rather have concerned about my problem than the creator of all things. Yeah. And so God will provide. He will, and he's gonna show up. And then there's this great part in Numbers 11, and I don't have time to talk about it, but I'm just going to end with this. It says, but Moses responded to the Lord. He's like, man, they're like 600,000 foot soldiers. So this is where he kind of shows them. He's like, I don't know, man. How are you going to get this meat to these people? And then he goes on and he says, and yet you say, I'll give them meat for the whole month. So God's promised to do this, which we'll talk about next week. All right, we're going to talk about the meat. Believe me, it's going to be fun. It says, even if we butcher all the flocks and the herds, would that satisfy them? Even if we caught all the fish in the sea, would that be enough? And then here it is. Then the Lord said to Moses, has my arm lost its power? In other words, is my arm too short to save? Am I incapable of showing up and doing something here? I mean, come on, Moses. You don't think I can deal with meat? You see? And God is saying, don't ever doubt that my arm is long enough to reach into your situation and to bring you out and to deliver you from the limbo that you're in. God's arm is not too short, and he reaches down with an outstretched arms and he gathers you to himself. That's the God we serve. He wants to provide. He loves you. And I said, this is my theology in a nutshell. My God is not a T-Rex. Think about it. Think about it. God's arm is stronger, bigger, longer than a T-Rex. Y'all are going to remember that. Oh, that's horrible. I'm sorry. All right. I'm going to have to wrap this up. God goes to Abraham and he says, Abraham, I know you have faith. I know you believe in me. But I'm asking you to take a step further. And this is a crazy story in the Bible. He says, I want you to take your only son, Isaac, and I want you to go up on the mountain, and I want you to sacrifice him to me. It's one of the most disturbing stories in the Bible. And one of the things I've learned about that story is really about this, is that God will not ever compete for what is rightfully His glory, His worship. And so He's testing Abraham. And one of the things I love about this story is like right when he's about to do the deed, God says no. And then all of a sudden, over in the thicket, He's provided the sacrifice. God always will provide. He's always looking out for you. He sees you. He hears you. He's concerned about you. So may you not leave today with a very clear idea of this, that God will provide. He's going to do it exactly at the right time, and He's going to do it because He loves you. He cares for you, and His goal is to get you there. Let's pray. God, we thank you for how good you are to us. We don't even deserve it, but you are so good. You are so faithful. You provide in so many ways that we don't even see. You're so worthy, God. God, I know that there are many of us in this room that have gone through some really difficult times recently or are continuing to go through them. And we just need you today. We just need you today. That's all we can say. We don't even know how we need you. We just need you. And so I just want to pray for you. So if you're in a place where you want to say, God, I need you. God, would you see me? Would you hear me? Would you be concerned about my situation? If that's where you're at, I want to be able to pray for you. And perhaps you're in a place where you're like, man, I don't even know about this Jesus guy. I don't even know about God. I want to take a step. I want to get to know Him. I'm ready to be all in. I'm ready to say yes to Christ. I don't know where you are today, but I do know that I want to pray for you. And so whether you need help, whether you want to take the step of saying yes to Christ for the first time, whatever it is, I just want to pray for you. And so one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, with heads bowed, eyes closed, I'm just going to ask, if you need prayer, if you need help, if you were ready to make that first step, I just want you to lift your hand up real quick so I can pray for you. Just lift it up. Heads bowed, eyes closed. Yes, all those hands. Thank you, Jesus. I see your hands. I see your hands all the way at the top. All the way at the top. Thank you, Lord. Look at that. Thank you, Jesus. God, we praise you for those hands. We praise you for each life that's represented in there. And Jesus, I pray right now that you would come in, that you would provide, and that you would move in a powerful way in their lives. Would you do what you do best at just the right time? Would you show up and do something great? And Jesus, I pray for that person that's ready to take that step. And I just want to pray for you, and you can pray with me as you pray and just say, Jesus, I need you. I repent of my sins. I need you in my life. I can't do it alone. Would you come in and save me? Would you be my Lord? Would you be the one that transforms me from the inside out? And would you give my life meaning? Would you give my life purpose? Would you give my life direction? We thank you, Lord, for this. Praise you, Jesus, for this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. And all of God's people celebrate those that have made decisions today.